All right, welcome to episode number 13 of Burn Rate and Beyond. My name is Chad Foltz, and I'm here with the always smiling Jeffrey Mazza.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yeah, today we're going to tackle the concept of streamlining financial processes, and with the concept of, well, just trying to make the business work better. And I think actually this is something we've talked about before, something similar. In episode 4 and episode 11, we talked about optimizing different things. And so, I was like, okay, today we're talking about streamlining, and I'm like, what's the difference between streamlining and optimizing? Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, and there have been those few episodes where we did talk about the optimizing, and I think when it comes to my kind of kind of input would be from an optimizing standpoint, like we talked about, is really trying to find the most effective, I guess, outcome from the existing resources, right? This is the best we can do for what we have, type of thing. All right, and streamlining to me is kind of reducing some of that, I guess, friction in the process, right? Kind of making the workflow and simpler and faster. Kind of removing items and roadblocks or hurdles that slow the process down to make it more, call it streamlined, faster. They complement each other, but streamlining can help minimize some of the roadblocks and make things easier and simpler. From my perspective.
Yeah, do you ever feel like about which one is like, if you had to, if you're looking at a process and you're saying, oh, I should streamline this, or oh, I should optimize it. Like, is there one you do first, or is it kind of like the same process, or like chicken and the egg kind of thing?
Well, true. Well, and I think that could get very, kind of shaky to some people, not really understanding the both. But for me, it's just if you are establishing a process or have a process of, looking at what, from an optimization standpoint is, let's look at what we have here and see, kind of fine tune that process of, should there be any, hurdles and try to optimize it. But then, the other hand of is, hey, this is the best that we have, but like, are there ways to streamline it even better? So, I don't think there's right or wrong, but my brain kind of works to optimizing to streamlining, kind of get it done in a best way possible. But then, are there areas that you can even improve that even more? So that's just how, I don't know about your thoughts too, Chad.
Yeah, I feel like the streamlining is kind of like that. What's that? Kaizen, like that continuous, just slightly trying to get better. Always trying to just revisit it, look back, and say, hey, what about this one piece? How can we make this a little more efficient, remove a little bit more friction? And I also think of like, we got the physics going on here, like a streamlined, like like an airplane that's like super aerodynamic. And so like, like the engineers are always looking like, oh, where's this little ripple in air where we can reduce drag and increase lift and make the airplane fly higher and faster and with less energy. So yeah, that's the way I like to think about it. Is it's just a Kaizen, is trying to get a little bit better over time. Excuse me. So I guess let's just kind of talk about, obviously we're not building airplanes here, we're building financial reporting systems. So
thankfully you don't want us building airplanes.
Slightly different process. But I guess the question is, let's see, like what are some things we should look out for? Where to get started?
Well, I think, understanding, having a process, all right, especially in the financial world, right? And, to me, it's really kind of, I like to say even whiteboard, just kind of documenting the process, right? And then, from there, you kind of have like what that process is, to then you can start to look at, parts of that process that, almost like that conveyor belt, starting from start to finish, understanding kind of who's touching what, how long these processes, certain tasks within it, to really get a good feel. Then you can start to, picking away at it almost, from the beginning to see if there's any ways to streamline it. If there's a simpler way or a faster way to do, process, part of the A, then goes into B, you can start to uncover some areas that, we could shave off, 38 minutes, by changing these four things, and without affecting any sort of quality. To me, it's just identifying, understanding what a certain process is, and then just start chipping away at it, to kind of just to see, I guess. But
Right. So just kind of like mapping it out, like a flow chart, like on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, like on a computer, you might use lucid charts or something like that, where you just you just say, this is what we're doing. That
the
makes me
flow
think.
chart is that's a great point, Chad, and I think one of our exercises, right, on that team meeting that we had, and we kind of looked at flow charts, and it was
Yeah,
it was awesome.
Christine Monahan. Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a great, fun exercise, but it's also very eye-opening once you do lay it down on a piece of paper and you do look at it and you can see some of those bottlenecks. So it's a great exercise, and that's a great point.
Yeah, and so I think there's a couple of things you find once you actually lay out the process on paper, or visually, is that you can you can find redundant things, redundant steps, and say, okay, well, we're doing this here, but we're also doing it over here, and just in case someone else is doing it, farther down the line again, because you've actually laid it out and looked at it. So that's, I think, the beginning of it. There is a little bit of, I guess, in lots of processes, there is an important part of you do it, and then you check it to make sure that it's correct, complete.
Yeah.
And that's there definitely is a fine line between completely redoing a process, which becomes redundant, and reviewing a process to ensure that it's accurate. I think that's a fine line that I guess some processes are more prone to complete redundancy, and others are easy to do a high level review.
And do you?
I guess,
Like, just really quick too, is like, I guess, like, do you think, from your perspective, where maybe some small businesses kind of get stuck almost trying to streamline their financial tasks, or like, where do you think they might get stuck? Because
yeah, I think that I think there's what do you call it? There's a quantum leap from like lots of small businesses just to cash basis accounting, and there's the founder, the owner, who's just getting it done, sending out the invoices, reconciling everything. But then once the company starts scaling, and the founders and the owners who are getting a little bit farther away from things, they still think that there's this concept of like, well, we're just going to streamline it. We don't need to gather any receipts. Oh, they're all in our inbox. There's no.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is but to keep it streamlined, they just tell the bookkeeper to just reconcile everything, just whatever's spent, just code it to the right place. But then the oversight is missing, that it's like, well, was this expenditure approved? Because the bookkeeper isn't spending the money.
Yeah.
The founder is the one spending the money. So is the expenditure approved? Is the expenditure the amount that was agreed upon? So I think that's where there's a fine line, where in the beginning, when a founder, the owner, is actually doing the accounting quickly and easily, and paying attention to all, and the volume is relatively low, it's easy for them to see and control. Oh yeah, oh, that guy overcharged me. Oh, they already they double charged me, or whatever. Versus then, like small businesses, that gets lost very quickly, once someone else takes over. I feel like that's a big piece of underutilization of a good process of reviewing bills before they get paid. Because I think that's also one of those things, like a modern thing, right? How are bills paid? Back in the day when you were a kid, like your parents would sit down at the beginning of the month or whatever it was and write a check to the mortgage company, or write the rent check, right?
Yep. That's exactly it. I remember that. The checkbooks. Yeah. I don't know, but I do. I mean, remember that, and I mean, that's exactly what it was.
So, but now that everything's automated, it just happens, and so it's hard. You have to, you always have to be more on top of it to make sure it doesn't accidentally get out of control. See, what another one is procedures. Is there like, have you seen how some businesses have been able to standardize their procedures over time, or is there like a tipping point or a specific opportunity?
Um, yeah, I mean, it is, I guess, challenging, because when you start looking at a procedure, I mean, you and I could literally sit down and say, this is what the procedure should be. And honestly, there'll probably be some things that are similar, some things are different, but I think, when you standardize a financial procedure, it's kind of the collaboration, but, this, once you kind of to identify what that procedure is to standardize it, then to me, that's where it's a different shift, right? Because it's not like, well, Chad does it this way, Jeff does it differently. We kind of get the same result, but how is it that scale, or how do you train someone, right? So, for me, it is important to standardize the procedures as well, because it does, I think, improve accuracy, and we talk about training and onboarding, and also like scalability, right? I mean, this is just what we do, how we do it. It doesn't matter if, 10 people are doing it. You can pull someone off the street and just say, like, this is how we actually do this procedure. Just so it's very streamlined, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, in any businesses, there's always a trade-off, right? Like the example I was using before, of like the owner just reconciling everything quickly and not using a bill or a document to justify it.
Yeah.
The trade-off there is like you're optimizing for speed versus accuracy, right? And so
Yep.
anytime you put in a new process, you have to choose: are we optimizing for speed, are we optimizing for accuracy, or are we trying to go for both? Which can be done, but obviously that costs more, because you have to maybe you have to spend the founder or somebody with a big salary needs to actually do the work, which doesn't make any sense most of the time. But
Yep.
anyway, the point is, when we're standardizing, right, the idea is how to get consistent results independent of the individual who's doing it, right? So you're saying, yeah, anybody can come off the street and be like, here's the piece of paper, and I can follow it, right? So I think what I've seen a number of times is like, maybe a group has a company starts hiring sales teams, and so they have sales team one and sales team two and sales team three, and they have different managers, and each manager kind of handles certain costs or certain reimbursements their own way. And then it turns into this whole like concept of like, well, how much should we be spending? Like, team one spends this, team two spends that. And so then it's like, okay, well, if we don't, A, are they comparable, and how do we evaluate it, right? So,
Yeah.
and are they doing it the same way, and who's actually ultimately responsible for it? So I think that's what you're saying, that this is how we do it. This is the same for you, same for me, same for anybody. Um, I guess it kind of greases the wheels to get consistent results on a regular basis, which is the name of the game in this.
100% agree. Yeah.
Good stuff. What about data integration? Is that another piece of this that gets, well, I guess there's big opportunities.
I do, and such a great point too, because when we start looking at streamlining, making processes and procedures like faster, accurate, scalability, I think the more that data can be integrated could help from the streamlining process, where systems are talking to each other, right? I have to go from this system to that system, or transfer data manually, because it can lead to errors, right? I mean, as a human, right, human errors always plays a factor, but maybe there's the data entry, or the end result, whatever we're trying to look at, could be just delayed. But when you start looking at the data integration, and systems are talking, right, the CRM and the payroll, and you're kind of looking at more real-time data with less errors, it helps the process in itself, and also gives insights pretty fast too. So I think it's very, very important nowadays. Like, the technology is there to make sure that systems are talking to each other. But I don't know about your thoughts on that too, Chad.
Yeah, and I guess that also kind of, I feel like the data integration piece goes back to the previous one about standardizing
Mm-hmm.
procedures. Like one thing we've been talking a lot about with one client recently is trying to figure out how to automate a series of reports. Well, but you can't, if you have inconsistent inputs, you can't automate the process to create the reports. So kind of step zero almost is, well, let's automate, let's standardize the way we actually do things so that the data is in a certain, in a format and comes in a certain standardized way, so that when we try to report on the data, we
Yeah.
get we can automate that, or we can standardize that reporting procedure. So that's another piece of the streamlining process. It's like, okay, well, in order to remove the obstacle of humans being involved and slowing down this whole reporting process, well, okay, well, let's fix the data, and maybe you have data coming from a lot of different systems, and each system has their own little idiosyncrasies, and so, okay, well, we need to, you know, massage the data into one system so that when it gets into the one system, it's all standardized. So that's it's a big opportunity, and definitely I've definitely seen a number of companies who have real-time data, but they can't really use it because it's all just scattered. You know, it's not standardized in any consistent way. Excuse me, good stuff. What about accuracy? You know, we've talked about a bunch of different things, and I guess if we over streamline, can we lose accuracy as well?
Well, I think there is that level of, let's say, risk, right? I mean, I don't think there's totally eliminate certain areas, and I just think a lot of times it could mitigate a lot of it too. But I think when it comes down to like accuracy and, you know, the automation, I think there's some key like areas that you can help, I think, minimize any sort of risk, right? And sometimes that, you know, I've seen that, especially like ERPs, right? They're very multifunctional. They do a lot, but, you know, there's multiple like role-based access, right? Certain levels, you know, might have certain access at a lower level, and as you get up, you get more. So there's not a bunch of, you know, admins in there that can not only see data but can manipulate the data. And a lot of these systems have, you know, the audit trails where you can actually, you know, see who's in there, who's touching it. But then also even just, you know, routine comes some sort of, you know, reconciliations, right, that take place, you know, through the banks and AR subledgers, things like that, just to kind of during the process see who's, you know, who's in there to help minimize. But there's even probably tools too to find some sort of, you know, areas or anomalies that you can kind of spot as well. But, you know, for me, the role-based access is a big, you know, big driver too that can help minimize some of that stuff.
Yeah, like it's kind of a need to know. Do you have a need to know all this information? And if you don't, then you don't need access, maybe.
Exactly, because it does help, I guess, minimize. I like to say too many cooks in the kitchen, and if they don't need to be there, then, you know, that it comes with the level of, you know, access, I guess.
Yeah, and that actually is one of those things. Like there's also a trade-off there too, right? Where definitely too many cooks in the kitchen can be a problem. Where and that's actually, there's like 2 or 3 parts to this. One is are we streamlining? If we have standard processes, do all the cooks do the process the same way? And 2, if someone is absent, sick, on vacation, whatever it is there someone who has the right access and the right information and the ability to execute in their place? And so that's where you know, if you're wanting to have very live, up-to-date information, you definitely need to have those backups set up, which kind of gets back to the fundamental point here, is like we need to have processes that are standardized and streamlined so that that friction is low. I guess, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I was just going to ask too, like even from your experience, I mean, is there, you were talking about processes and automation for the streamline, right? But I guess, is there one, you know, that comes to mind from your experience of, you know, improvement that really kind of gives companies like a, you know, a really good ROI that sometimes gets often overlooked?
I would say probably one of the biggest things is, well, I guess there's 2 pieces in the financial process, and that's kind of what we're talking about here today, is that flow chart. Like what we did with Christy was super cool, and she had all these like colorful diagrams, and she's like, well, if you, I think it was like the manual processes she used as one color, and And so then you do this process and you can look at it, you're like, oh wow, all these things are manual. There's probably ways to automate, if not all of them, a number of them. And we can kind of start looking into saying, okay, well, if looking into how to actually leverage the technology that's available, because things are also changing really fast too. What you could automate now is not the same as what you could automate even last year or 2 years ago with AI and the bots and not bots, but the agent, the new agent thing. So anyway, so there's lots of things going on. Obviously, security is an issue that needs to be taken seriously, but there's a number of opportunities there. I think the other one is just having a person who's dedicated to reducing this kind of friction almost company wide.
Yeah.
Because the financial piece is one, but the financial piece lots of times relies on operations. And if operations is creating messes, well, then the financial stuff is messy because the operations team is creating data in a bunch of different ways. So I think it can't just be like, hey, accountants, get track together. Well, we all kind of, it's a kind of like it's like a domino effect, right? It's like, okay, well, if the data comes in clean from the beginning, which is operations and sales and purchasing, then it's easier for the rest of it down the stream to create good results.
That's awesome.
Let's see here. Let's see if there's any other topics that we had here. I guess the other one that came to mind was if someone's looking to streamline their financials, is there like a timeline? How long can they expect to see good results?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, right off the bat, it's like, I think it depends on, I guess the business, like kind of what is being streamlined, right? The start. But I think just from a very high level, I mean, if I had to throw a number on it, my guess would be like 30 to 60 days-ish range, right? Where you start to, evaluate the process, try to find those improvements, do the same like flowchart that we did and those exercises, and then make those tweaks, fixes, or improvements, and then, start to do that, and start to, the staff gets in there and starts to do that day to day. But once it starts to get rolling, I mean, you'll start to, like, I think, see results pretty fast. Data's coming out faster. You have more confidence in the numbers, so it's a new process, so it takes a little time, but I just think it depends on what is being streamlined. Some very massive process, or is it, a couple tweaks here and there to certain little things, could be even faster.
Yeah, and I also think it's like it's a stacking process too, right? Because sometimes like you said, there might be something relatively straightforward that you can see results almost immediately within the first month or 2 months. And then you might have to do a few cycles of that before you get to the next big thing that you see. Like one thing that came up was financial dashboards, right? So, okay, cool. Tracking KPIs, tracking profitability, tracking, gross profit in different ways. Well, that's great. Like we done day to day, hour by hour, whatever it is, if you have the data that's available and like you said, trustworthy, to do it. But you might have to work on improving some of that reporting for the first 60, 90, 120, maybe even 6 months to get it to the point where, okay, cool, now we have this dashboard that's very highly automated and reliable. But you had to do a bunch of things beforehand before you can just get to it. A really cool dashboard spitting out interesting information, interesting and useful information, I guess is the other one.
Very true. But yeah, that's great.
All right. Well, I guess do you have any resources or ideas to share here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. There's a book, it's called Scaling Up, by Vern Harnish. And I read this book a while ago, but it is a good read, and it really kind of focuses on helping companies grow successfully, sustainably. And there's a lot of good topics in there for right people, right seats, strategy, defining those clear strategies, things like that, and execution. So that's a good read. From a technology side, I mean, there are tools. You look at the Fathoms and the Power BIs for certain dashboards, but even as simple as Bill.com, that's an AP automation. There's an RPA, which is robotic process automation, as well as now it's even higher, which is AI. So there's a lot of tools out there, and even QuickBooks Online is always evolving with some technology too that could help. But starting there and really kind of defining the needs of what the business needs, and then start putting some of these key pieces in there to help the business. But how about you?
And actually,
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned Bill.com. Another one that we use a lot is RAM, and I feel like it both of those platforms actually really facilitate. There's a couple different platforms out there too, but they really facilitate the collaboration process between operations and finance, and it's easier to get operations involved in approving bills, approving expense reports, participating in what you might call the budgeting process.
Yeah.
And so just because it facilitates visibility into the financials in a way that, because a manager only needs to see what the manager needs to see. They don't need to see how many all the things inside the financials. They don't need to see what necessarily they're responsible for, which is a small fraction of the entire thing. So by using a platform that handles AP, it facilitates that view. Another good one is like an HR platform, like Bamboo HR, Zoho People, or something like that, where the management of full-time employees and all employees, full-time, part-time, and contractors that are used on a frequent basis can be plugged in there, and then same way the managers can be involved in understanding how much these people cost and what's the org structure and all that stuff. So I think those two tools facilitate creating better streamlined collaboration between both operations and finance. But well, good stuff, Jeff. I like the Vern Harnish book. I haven't read that one in a while. That'd be a good one to pick up again to see if there's any new nuggets that I might notice. Now that it's been a few years since I picked it up. But good stuff. Well, that's
I might need to reread it too.
All right. Well, good stuff. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here for today, and hope to see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks, guys.